And joining us now in video and also on the air, we've got Charlie Winfield. He's an attorney, and also I believe Mr. Winfield was a classmate of Judge Amy Coney Barrett at the Notre Dame Law School. Good afternoon, Charlie. Thanks for coming on.
Well, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
So, have you been watching?
Every minute. I have been glued to it. And, I told people going into this that I thought she was going to prove herself to be an outstanding nominee. And been probably just been surprised about how good she's been. She's just done an outstanding job.
All right, so tell us the background and the connection. You went to law school at Notre Dame with Miss Barrett, is that correct?
I did. So I grew up here in Starkville, Mississippi, and one day got the idea that I was going to get out of the South. So I picked Notre Dame, and I found out in a hurry that Notre Dame's a little too cold for me, by the way. But the 2 days before we started class, I met Amy, and she being a Southerner like me, we kind of made quick friends. And I remember thinking at the time that, Amy, if you just stick with me, I'll get you through this whole thing. She was brilliant, but she didn't act that way. She doesn't come into the room trying to prove herself to be the brightest person or the most commanding presence. I've used the analogy in sports sometimes. She lets the game come to her. She's very deliberate. She's very intelligent, but she has absolutely no ego about that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's impressed me, and you tell me if this was your experience as a classmate, is that she's very independent thinker, and which is critical and key, I think, to be an effective jurist, especially on the Supreme Court. And she makes that clear, and it just seems like the line of questioning continues to try to trap her into, I guess, weighing in a way that would be, frankly, inappropriate. And she's made that clear, that it would not be appropriate, or however she's prefaced it, for her to take positions on certain things without context, without more data, without cases in front of her, briefings and so forth. Was that your experience with the judge when you were a classmate? Was she just kind of an independent thinker like that?
Always, and she was a very advanced thinker. Her knowledge of the law was very far ahead of the rest of us, to be honest with you. In fact, in 10 of our classes in law school, she had the highest grade out of 225 people, which is terribly unusual. Wow. But you make a really good point about her independence, and the thing I think that's critical to understanding her is that even though we're seeing a political process play out on our TV screen, she is not a political creature at all.
Right.
Where some of us in law school stayed up arguing about whether Bob Dole should win the election or Bill Clinton, she was one who stood up worried about Marbury versus Madison and its implications. She is a jurist, not a politician. And the thing about it is she is a very principled jurist. She is one who doesn't believe in trying to create policy. She looks at the text of the law, says, what does it mean? And that's the law. Whether she likes the outcome or doesn't, she's going to apply it. And I think we've seen that in a lot of her opinions on the Seventh Circuit.
Yeah, and she's made it clear over and over, and she's been questioned about it, that she is an originalist, and she believes in the written word of the law, and that's that's her philosophy. That's how she acts as a judge. She was also questioned about her likeness to Justice Scalia, and her response was perfect. She said, if I am fortunate to be confirmed, you're not getting Justice Scalia, you're getting Justice Barrett. It's what she said. I'm paraphrasing it a little bit, but she made it clear we may share some degree of judicial philosophy and maybe like-minded in many areas, but I'm not him. She made that clear. It's like they were trying to trap her into saying, well, I'm just a reincarnation of him.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm sometimes guilty of using sports analogies, so I'll use another. Not every football coach runs the same version of the spread offense, okay?
Exactly.
So much like Scalia, Amy believes in running the spread, but it looks very different. She may run it more. He may throw it more. But the idea is, too, she pointed out, I thought it was a great point, Justice Thomas is viewed as an originalist, and yet he and Scalia would find themselves on opposite sides of the same issues. They went through the same process, they went through the same form of analysis, but sometimes the math added up differently and they got different results.
Yeah. So, Charlie, your opinion question here. What do you think about the way this process is kind of devolved and degenerated into just a political theater and just mudslinging, frankly, by senators on the Judiciary Committee from the party opposite of the president, who obviously would nominate a candidate? It just seems to kind of conflict with the veneration, shall we say, of the institution in our government and the way it was designed to work. It's become political fanfare.
It's absolutely disgusting in many ways. And I say this with respect to no matter who the nominee is. I'm probably a little more sensitive to it because I'm watching a friend go through it. But we saw how little the process actually means yesterday and how much political theater it is when we saw senators take their entire period of time for questioning and never ask a question.
Never ask a question.
They were giving lectures. They were making political speeches. I just cannot imagine that that's what our founders had in mind. And I thought Amy did an outstanding job yesterday. She was asked about her decision to go through this process, and she talked about how difficult it was. You know, she has 2 children that are adopted from Haiti who have been accused of being props. Man, that's just a vile accusation. That's a terrible, cruel thing to say to someone who has raised these children for, upwards of 17 years. And talking about the difficulty of deciding voluntarily to put your family through that. I hate to see it, and I mean that without respect to whether it's a Democrat or a Republican appointee. I don't think this is the process we should have.
Yeah, it's become so personal. I mean, when Senator Mazie Hirono from Hawaii, asked her about sexual assault, how did she keep a straight face in answering that question? I mean, that was just absurd.
Yeah, and the thing about Amy, it is difficult to explain to someone who doesn't know her how good of a person she is. This is the most fundamentally honest, decent, good people that I have ever met in my entire life. This is a person who had 9.5 hours to get to my wedding, and she had a 10-hour drive to get there, and she came anyway. This is a person who cares about her friends. I told somebody the most challenging conversation I ever had with her when she found out that one of her friends was starting to date one of my friends. 20 years later, they're married, by the way. But she was quite protective. But she is just a fundamentally good, honest, decent person.
So she attended your wedding.
She did. She did arrive 30 minutes late, but she was there. That was part of the deal. She knew she was going to be late, but came anyway, which says a lot about her.
Well, that is incredible. Well, I think that Charlie obviously speaks to the kind of person you are, frankly, because we see in living color, having her life vetted in front of the nation, what a quality person she is. So if she thought enough of you to attend your wedding, you should be proud. And I know you are of that, and that's incredible. And to have you here in the great state of Mississippi is even better. So we have that direct connection. Have you talked to her at all since this has been going on? Do you still maintain contact with her?
Yeah, we talk somewhat, I won't say regularly, but periodically, and we have communicated throughout the process. And she's very calm. She's wasn't terribly concerned going into this about any attacks on her character because she is so firm in who she is. Yeah. I think it's a big testament, too, by the way. It will be released today, but our law school class wrote a recommendation letter for her. It's the most signatures that have ever been had from a law school class, and not one person who didn't sign did so because they were concerned about her as a character. They were concerned about having cases in the Supreme Court or being canceled, unfortunately, in the culture we're in. She's outstanding.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I saw that there's a letter that came out of the faculty as well of Notre Dame, but I noticed none of those are from the law school that are, of course, speaking out against her confirmation, which I looked at the list of those. I didn't know we had so many professors of gender studies, frankly.
Fourth librarian.
Exactly. Charlie, thanks so much for coming on the program. That was great, very insightful. Appreciate it, sir. We'll talk to you again after this confirmation. Stay tuned. Thanks, man.